Hey everybody who is joining in. My name is Tatum Ayomike. I am the CEO and executive producer at Anchored Media. I'm also the host of the Blessed and Bossed Up podcast. What I do in a nutshell is I build profitable platforms, specifically with podcasts, and I build prosperous people. So I do that on my show, Blessed and Bossed Up. We have an open house with my company, Anchored Media, happening this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where you can learn about our company, our team, and everything that we have to offer to those of you guys who are looking to build a platform via podcasting. Hey, everybody who's coming in. How are you? Give me some hearts. Tell me where you from. Y'all coming in here quick. I'm put my favorite filter on because sis was not putting on no makeup to get on the internet today. Hey everybody that is coming in. Let me type in the open house details really quick and so I could pin it. Atlanta, what's up? Khadijah from Chicago. Oh my gosh, I just thought about when we had the tour in the God is My CEO tour a couple years ago when we were in Chicago. Let me tell you about that pizza. That pizza was so good that we went and got one, packed it, and brought it back home. And my husband demolished that pizza. Hey, Ohio. See, now I got distracted thinking about food. Hey, Detroit. Hey, DC. I saw DC. All right, let me type this in. Yes, we have the best pizza. You do. You really do. You and Erica Campbell's daughters are long lost sisters. Really? I don't know what she looked like. Hopefully she cute, or I might be a little offended. I'm playing. Yes, I enjoy our VIP lunch. Yes. Louisiana. Oh my gosh. Another place that I like to eat. Why y'all doing this to me? Clearly I haven't eaten today. I would literally fly to New Orleans just to go get food, for sure. Okay, let me stop playing and get to what we on here for. Hey, West Palm Beach, Florida. All right, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to be doing a Q&A on podcasting. And so I have my notes here in my notebook. But if you have any questions, type them in. So that way I can answer them for you before I hop off. But I have some of the most popular ones. So I was like, let me go live, get these questions out there. They food so good. Ain't it though? We need a state-to-state brunch. Oh my gosh. I would be big as a house. I love to eat. She's cute. I wouldn't play you like that. Thank you, Joy. Thank you. All right. So I did a little intro for the replay. But for those of you guys who don't know me or you just started following me, hello. How are you? My name is Tatum Ayomike. I am the CEO of Anchored Media. At Anchored Media, we build profitable podcasts. So I help people to build profitable platforms, and I help build prosperous people as well. I have a podcast of my own called Blessed and Bossed Up, where I teach people how to grow in their faith and their business. And so on all of my platforms, you'll always see me sharing information about how people can grow deeper in their faith. It's not about me, it's about God. And so I love what I do. I love Anchor Media. I love to be able to take people who are just regular, everyday people, just like I was 4 years ago, who have something to say, who have a calling, who have something of value, and then take that, put the strategy on top of it to allow them to build a platform that makes impact and income. One thing about Anchored Media is that we have so many success stories that it blows my mind. And I believe that when it comes to teaching anything, especially on the internet, it's not about how successful you can make yourself. Before I launched Anchored Media, I told my team, which at the time was my husband, just my husband, like, look, starting this company, but Blessed and Bossed Up would not be the only success story. We won't be a one-hit wonder. We have to create a system that's going to be able to be duplicated with other platforms. And so that's what we've done. So you'll rarely see, I might talk about Blessed and Bossed Up on my page because I host the show, but you'll barely see us use Blessed and Bossed Up in the Anchor Media stuff because it's not about me. It's not about that platform. It's about our system and the results that happen from that system. So we've had so many shows that have charted, who continue to chart on Apple Podcasts. Like we've been doing this for really like we started in 2019 with our first retreat. And since then, we've created shows that have gone from new shows that have already been out, have gone from hundreds of listens to thousands of listens, local to international. People who are making hundreds of dollars in their business to thousands of dollars in their business as a result of implementing the tools that we teach within our program. So this Wednesday, we have an open house that's happening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to learn about Anchor Media, it's just an open house. It's free. It's just an opportunity for me to present our company to you guys, let you know what we do, let you know who we work with, and tell you about our event that's coming up in December. One thing about our retreats, it's a multi-day event for new and aspiring podcasters to teach you how to build a profitable platform. One thing about our event is it sells out every time. There is an application period because we do choose the podcast we want to work with, especially being a person of faith. I understand the value of our system and the value of our process to where when we apply it to a show, listeners increase. And that's great, but it's also something that if not used with wisdom, it could be a hindrance to what we believe in, which is the kingdom of God advancing. And so we have an application period because we want to make sure that we're not building platforms that are going to blow up the enemy's agenda. We want to work with people of God and blow up God's agenda. So come to the open house. The link to sign up is in my bio. And yeah, I hope to see you guys there. We'll just present the program to you, our company to you, and then you can apply if you want to work with us. Super excited about the one in July. Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait for July. Let me see. I have a question. I'll answer the questions here first before my notes, since y'all are here in real time. How can you develop a consistent theme for your podcast, but also talk about different topics? That's a great question. So when you're developing your show should have, one of the things I teach people is the importance of having a unique selling proposition. So pretty much what sets your show apart from other shows in your category. And so a part of that is coming up with like the theme or your show or your mission or objective that you want to have on your platform. So when I first started podcasting, I started podcasting 4 years ago, and it wasn't Blessed and Bossed Up. It was another show with a co-host. And I started because I wanted to talk about the journey of entrepreneurship. I felt that there was a gap in the marketplace to where a lot of people were already successful, and it seemed as if they just woke up and was great. And I didn't understand that. I couldn't relate to that. I was still on day one trying to figure it out, still trying to figure out, how do I quit my job? Like, how do I make business a full-time thing? There was a level of the details that I felt was missing, and I felt that a lot of the advice that was being given was surface level. Like, oh, millionaires wake up every day at 5 a.m. So you need to wake up every day at 5 a.m. Yeah, until I become a millionaire and I wake up at 8. So like that's general stuff. What are the details of building a business that's going to work for me? And so I wanted to just talk about the process of day one of starting a podcast. Of being an entrepreneur. And that's where we started. And so everything we talked about encompassed all of entrepreneurship. We talked about dating as an entrepreneur. We talked about, building a business and vacation and finances and all of these things. We talked about a lot. So then when I got saved, as I say, because I got saved as a teenager originally, but I went right back out into the world. I didn't really live for God at that point, and so it wasn't until maybe maybe 4 years ago, around the same time, not too long after I launched my podcast, that I got saved. And that meant that for me, that just means that that's when I decided that I wanted to live a life for God here on earth. And so, in doing that, I started to learn how to pray. I learned how to hear from God. I learned just the foundational things of what it meant to live righteously. And in that, and started getting instructions, God began to tell me that I had the concept right of talking about the journey of business, but I had the mission, the kingdom assignment off. What he needed for me to do was to teach people that he is the one who put that vision inside of them, and they need to seek him to live it out. And so he started dealing with me about it was time to build this gap. Fill this gap between faith and business, because I was taught, I went to college and I got a job after graduating from college. And I was always taught that religion was not meant for the workplace. You don't talk about religion. You don't talk about politics. And it's funny because I really only, a lot of times that really only applies to Christianity, because I will go in the workplace and it was okay to talk about Ramadan. It was okay to talk about Jewish holidays, but that's another topic for another day. But I was always taught traditionally in a lot of the classes that we took that I wasn't supposed to talk about religion. So I was conditioned that faith was separate from business or being professional. And so God had to rework my mindset in that area. And so he was doing that with me on the back end. And then after building that up to a certain extent, he started to let me know how the podcast was off and started to give me instructions on how to change it. So a part of that was doing it by myself. A part of that was changing the name. A part of that was changing the subject matter and the premise and the theme. So going back to your question. So now the theme of the podcast is to teach people how to seek God on behalf of their life and business, and to bridge that gap, or to fill that gap that we've been conditioned to have. And so with that, though, there's a lot of topics that can be talked about. We can talk. We just did. I just did an interview with Latina from Flawed and Free, and we talked about spiritual warfare. So that's a part of it, because you think you're about to build this platform and it's not going to be opposition. Come on now. Let's not go about this being naive. You're not going to build this platform and see the success and do things God's way and think that there's not going to be warfare coming. And so, I experience it all of the time, you know what I mean? And so, we talk about spiritual warfare. We talk about building. I did an episode recently about what you need to do before you launch your business, because you still got to be a good business person. You know what I'm saying? You can't fast until your ribs are showing and pray 24 hours a day and not do anything. You have to do work. It takes business acumen. You can't Being a woman of God doesn't give you an excuse to be a bad business person. So we talk about that. So we have this theme, this overarching message of making God the CEO and making sure that he is the head of your life and your business. But under that, there's so many different ways that we can go. And so with you building your podcast, what is the message? What does God want you to get across on your platform? And then go wherever you need to go with that. And especially one thing that I have a habit of, and that I made a habit of, especially after changing my business and my podcast over to doing it God's way, I don't speak unless he gives me something to speak about. And so usually that comes like I might be driving. And I'm like, oh, this is a podcast topic. Let me write it down. I may be doing something. Oh, this is a podcast topic. Let me write it down. I may be studying. I may be asked a certain question every time, and I'll write that down, and I cover whatever needs to be covered on the show. But again, it's all going to bring people back to God. That's the foundation. Send people back to their daddy. That's the foundation of everything. And every topic or whatever, as long as that gets accomplished to where I'm not glorifying Tatum, Let me know if y'all can hear me now. Can you hear me now? I see the ear. Still can't hear me? This is so expected. Am I good? No? Hold on. I had a thumbs up. We can now. We good? Yes? Yes? Won't he do it? Won't he do it? I laugh at the technical difficulties. Like I was saying on my live with on the Anchor Media page, I've recorded full podcast episodes and it was good too. Who knows where the file went? It wasn't there. So I had to be upset and hit record and do it all over again. I've done interviews that were so good. Something's wrong with the audio. Got to do it all over again. So this type of stuff happens. It's not time to get flustered. It's time to get focused and figure out how to make it work. So I'm glad that that you guys could hear me now. Otherwise, I would have hopped back in. That ain't no problem. That ain't no problem. All right. Again, if you guys have any questions about podcasts or building a platform, specifically podcasting, write it. Ask the question. I think you can click the little question thing down here and type it in, and I'll be happy to answer it for you. All right. So a couple of questions that I have, frequently asked questions about podcasts that I want to cover. First things first, a lot of people want to know is how to monetize your show in the beginning. Everybody want to know where the money resides. Okay, listen. You make money podcasting two different ways. You make it through advertising, and you make money podcasting through funneling people into an existing business. Now, making money advertising is great. Everybody wants to say, where do I get sponsors? How do I get sponsors? Now, you, when it comes to sponsors, you need to have at least, at first it was 10, but they're making it smaller, kind of like the, how social media influencing went from people with big brands to like micro influencers. It's similar when it comes to podcasting, the way they're kind of switching it a little bit. But you need at least 5,000 listens per episode in order to make money via ads. And that takes time. Get into that monetizable point as far as your listenership goes. It takes time, but that doesn't mean that it takes time to make money. You can start making money day one on your show if you put the correct systems in place to be able to funnel listeners into an existing business. There's also a cap when it comes to advertisers. There's a cap on how many ads that you can take per episode. And so because there's a cap on ads, there is a cap on money. I shared on my page recently that the Blessed and Bossed Up podcast, we're sold out on shows on advertising space until like the end of June. And what's funny is I had a call with a potential sponsor a couple of weeks ago, and they wanted like 4 episodes. He wanted 4 pre-roll ads back to back. So week 1, 2, 3, 4, he wanted them all to run back to back on each episode. I had to go back and say, that's not possible this year. I don't have 4 pre-roll ads in my inventory back to back. So I had to turn that advertiser away. And it sucks to turn away money, but that's the limitation to advertising dollars, is that there is going to be a cap on how many ads that you can take. I personally, now that my show is at, I try to keep it now to like maybe 30 minutes. I don't take more than 4 ads. I'll do 1 pre-roll, which is in the beginning of the show. I'll do 2 top mid rolls and then 1 post roll. I won't take more than that because you can't compromise the listener experience for money. You can't do that. And so I've listened to podcasts where it's one podcast that I really, really like, but I cannot listen to it because she got so many ads. It's like we're 5 minutes in before the show even starts off of just ads. Then come to the mid-roll part. It's like 4 different ads there, and it's like dynamic ad insertion. And sorry if I'm getting too technical, but that's pretty much where a radio host says an ad and it's inserted into the show. So I done heard 3 in your voice, 2 in the radio host voice. Like, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. So if you have too many different sponsors within an episode, that ruins the listener experience. And sponsors come because of listeners. So you can't compromise your listeners' experience for sponsors, because without them, you wouldn't have those sponsors. And so there's a limit when it comes to sponsorship, and your income will be capped if you're only focused on that. But when you're funneling people into an existing business, there's no limit to that. I've had people, and with that, it doesn't matter how many listeners you have. I've had people who bought my prayer journal, who bought my first book, who is a part of the Blessed and Bossed Up Society, who came to the tour, who came to Anchor Media's event, who signed up for our program after that, who is going to buy my devotional that comes out, and who's going to buy my book that's going to come out this year. So that'll be 8 times that one listener has paid me. And I've made more money by the second, maybe third, depending on what I'm offering. I've made more money by maybe the third time that they paid than that advertiser. So there's way more value and the advertising money is great. It's passive income. I know that I'm going to get a check for the rest of the year as long as I put out a podcast. But at the same time, it's more money to be made in funneling your your listeners into customers. But that takes strategy. The one downside to podcasting is that there's no automatic way that you get your listeners' information, right? So when I log into my hosts, I don't see who all is listening to the show, and I don't have a way to contact them. I just see a number, a big number, and then it broken down into what episodes they listen to. It might tell me if they're male or female, what cities people are listening. I see stuff like that, just demographic, type of information, but I don't have another way to contact them outside the podcast. And so God forbid if the podcast got deleted, which happened recently, Apple was doing some type of update or something with their system, and podcasts were being wiped off the app. And mine was one of them. And it was funny because I was trying to go and listen to something, and so I searched for the show and it was gone. And I was like, the devil is a liar. Left it at that. I said, I'll deal with it later. Not even thinking twice. Maybe like the next day, one of my partners emailed me and said, hey, Apple has this thing going on. A lot of people podcasts are being deleted. So I was like, oh, okay. Maybe like a day or two later, it came back. But if I wasn't tripping because I have other ways to communicate with my audience. We communicate on social media. I have email addresses, all of these different things. I have ways that I can communicate with my audience. So if the podcast gets deleted, it's not the end of the world. So it ended up coming back, and, I didn't lose any sleep or any checks. But at the same time, if you don't have those things in place and you're just relying on one platform, then it's probably going to be a lot more detrimental than it was. And so the thing about having the show, though, and funneling people then from listeners to customers is so you have to intentionally put the process in place. And that's one of the elements to our profitable podcast system is we teach you the elements that you need to have in place so that when you're asleep, somebody in Germany, somewhere across the world, depending on where you are able to listen to your show and opt into something that you're offering, and you're able to capture their information, and they're put into some type of funnel to where the podcast is working for you. I just had a conversation with Elisha, who she came through our academy in 2019. And so if you go to the Anchor Media page, she and I just did our live, and she was saying how she got a speaking opportunity recently off her show, just somebody who listened and said, hey, you have a show for moms. I'm not a mom, but I know that there's mom that's coming to my event. Would you like to speak? It's an opportunity. She was a part of this national campaign on mood disorders for moms, that person was able to hear what she had to say and her perspective and her message from her podcast. She didn't have to craft a pitch. She didn't have to find the right person to reach out to. She didn't have to put them in some type of CRM system. They found her as a result of her podcast. I got a book deal. Messing up the flow. Let me know if y'all can still hear me, because that's probably what happened last time is somebody called and they messed it up. Give me some hearts. Tell me in the comments if y'all can still hear me. Yep, we good? I'll wait a second. Yes, okay. Awesome. Okay, perfect. So I was saying that I had got a book deal this year. This company, I was minding my business. I took me a good little nap. I remember that day. I took me a good nap. I woke up, do what I usually do, grab my phone, check my emails, make sure I ain't missed nothing while I was in La La Land. And I got an email from a publishing company who found out about me based off my podcast. And they like to publish books for people with unique messages and ideas. And they wanted to talk. And I was like, first of all, I ain't have my glasses on because I'm asleep. So I got one eye open like, what? And so we end up setting up the call. Long story short, I'm now working with this publisher. And we're working on my second book. My first book was self-published. I did everything myself, wrote it. I got an editor to edit it, somebody to design it, but all of that was done myself. Now I have a team that's going to allow me to produce a book at the level that I've always wanted to do it. And that's come from my podcast. I didn't go find anybody. The book, I didn't even have an outline. All I knew was I had the idea for it because God had told me to start writing it, and he gave me the idea and the message for this book prior to. So I knew what I was writing my next book about. I just hadn't started doing it yet. And so here this company is finding me from my podcast, no manuscript submitted, nothing. And now I'm able to have the support and the resources that I need to produce a book on the level that I want to do it and the caliber that I want to do it. And that came just from podcasting. Looking at Anchor Media, my company, I remember being in a space with my podcast where I was frustrated because once I changed the podcast over to not talking about entrepreneurship anymore, but talking about God and business, I was frustrated because the previous version of the show was supporting the coaching program that I had where I was helping people build brands. And I was frustrated because I had to change the show over to now talking about God. And I felt like talking about God put me in a box that I didn't want to be in, and that people would not value my business acumen because I talked about faith. And so I was dealing with this internal struggle with that. But I decided to say, nevertheless, God, I said that I was going to live this life. So I'm feel a certain type of way right now, but I'm just going to trust that you got to figure it out, and we're just going to do what we got to do. And so I made a decision to be obedient. And so after I did that, God also told me to shut down my business. And you can go on my YouTube channel. I'll tell that whole story. My Scariest Leap of Faith is the title of that video, but I shut down the whole business. So now at that time I had nothing. I didn't have a business. I had this podcast that didn't have sponsorships at the time. This was before advertisers. So I had this podcast. I had this journal that I wrote, the God is My CEO journal. It's a guided prayer journal. I had, my book that I was writing is called Blessed and Bossed Up as well. And that's it. I'm like, God, this ain't what I dreamed of. I dreamed of having this company that I could lead, that my son or my future, I ain't have a kid then, but my future children can be the CEOs of. Like, I have a vision for having this huge $1 billion company. And so I'm like, God, this ain't gonna happen with these couple products. So, but nevertheless, still dealing with all of these internal struggles, but deciding to be obedient. And it wasn't until maybe 1.5 years after being obedient and shutting everything down that God began to give me the blueprint for Anchor Media. And it actually came after a fasting day. Me being a good friend, I was fasting with one of my friends because she was believing in God with some stuff for her business. And I'm like, well, what you gonna do? You trying to fast? I'm the friend that is down for whatever. Like, what we doing? We fasting, we praying. Like we meeting up, like what's happening? What are we going to do? I'm going to partner my faith with your faith, and we're going to do what we got to do. So so we were fasting together for her business. So I'm on my face all day, praying to God to get some answers for what she was believing in God for at that time. And little did I know that he had a whole message for me. I wasn't even worried about myself. And so, he gave me the whole blueprint for Anchor Media and told me not only the blueprint, but to go. And I'm like, finally, God, I'm tired of selling these little journals in this book. Like, I want the company. And so, he gave me the whole blueprint for Anchor Media. And within less than 2 years, within the first year, Anchor Media was a 6-figure company. And in less than 2 years, we've made over $330,000 just by doing what God said. And so the opportunity of podcasting, and we didn't miss a beat. I bypassed a lot of the foundational elements of starting a new business because I already had a platform, and all I had to do was take what I knew, the business acumen that I had, and put the system in place so where I'm able to just have something that works in my sleep to support this company that I'm building. So those are the ways that podcasts make money. And that's something that we love to teach. I noticed even as building Anchored Media to where I didn't want to just teach people how to launch podcasts. You can Google your way to launch a podcast. It's really not that deep. You can get you a microphone, find a host, upload your stuff, find somebody to do your graphic. You can do that on Fiverr. You can get somebody to do it for like $5. Get you a mic. It don't even got to be expensive. Record, upload, it's out. It really don't take that much. I didn't want to do that. It's enough people acting like it's difficult to launch a podcast. It's not. It's difficult to scale a show from a small podcast to one that makes impact and income. That's the hard part. That's the part that takes strategy and intentionality and a true skill set. And so that's where our profitable podcast system came in, because I want people to build shows that support them and that makes money for their business, as well as provides financial freedom to the things that they want to do. So those are the two ways that podcasts make money. And those are the ways that we teach. Funnel people into an existing business, which is our primary focus, and then also advertising. So when people get to that point where they're like, hey, Tatum, I already have, or I'm right at the cusp of 5,000 listens, I want to pitch brands, then we do that as well. Bev No Hill says, what if you don't have a business yet? Should that be built before starting a podcast? No. One of the things I want people to really understand is whenever there is people, there's profit. That's the way the world works, right? That's how advertising in general works. The reason why certain sponsors buy ad space on Real Housewives is because the demographic they want to get in front of is watching it. The reason why people buy space on ad space on podcasts is because the demographic the company wants to get in front of is listening, and they see value in the recommendation of the host. The reason why people advertise on social media is to get in front of their audience. So it's always people equal profit. That's the way it's always been from the beginning of time. Magazines, radio, TV, that's the way that the economy works when it comes to business. People equal profit. So if you don't have the profit part or the thing, the product or the services to make a profit, you just focus on the people. And that puts you in a better advantage because you're not building the platform to get anything from them. You're just trying to give them value. You're just giving them yourself. You're just giving them whatever information that they need in the way that they need it. So there's value in not having anything to sell yet, because you can take your time and just build the platform and just fall in love with the podcast and fall in love with the message. So no, you don't need to have anything to sell. And then once you build that platform and you get those people, you'll easily be able to profit because you can sell something as simple as an event. Y'all, we're going to get together and we're going to have brunch, tickets or this, food is included, whatever. And now you just made money off of having this gathering of people. It can be as simple as everybody is like, man, I wish I had this. And you can create it and sell it to your audience. So the profit will come. The products will come. But if you don't have those things, that's okay. But focus on building a platform of value that people love and that they buy into. Okay, so I'm going to the questions here. I ain't gonna never get to my notebook. I did one question off here. I'm never going to get to this notebook because y'all got the questions. All right. So someone said, what are the materials you need to start a podcast in your opinion? Well, the foundational things that you need is a microphone. I mean, you really don't need that. You can record on your phone. I personally just want to emphasize that podcast is audio only. So, for example, if you were to, anytime you eliminate one of your senses, the senses that are active is heightened. So if I close my eyes, I could hear better because my hearing is not being impaired or I'm not getting distracted by what I see. So with podcasting, because it's audio only, a lot of the sounds or the things, the audio mistakes are a lot more noticeable because there's no other type of stimulation happening. So when it comes to the equipment for your show, I highly suggest getting a good microphone. Now, good does not mean expensive. I've had a $40 mic, a $50 mic, a $200 mic. The one I use the most is the $50 mic. And that one, the audio is great. It does not have to be expensive. If you click the link in my bio to my Amazon store, I have the link to 2 microphones that I use. And so you can find that there. Just make sure whatever microphone that you buy, that you have the option to hear what it sounds like. So that way you're not buying something that's trash. But yeah, you need a microphone. You need a host. Apple Podcasts is the biggest distributor of podcasts, and they do absolutely nothing. You don't upload your show to Apple, you upload to a host. So you can host on Lisbon, Buzzsprout, Audio Boom, Podbean, all of these different podcast hosts. You can just Google podcast hosting, do like a compare and contrast to see which one fits your need the best. And then choose a platform. So you need a microphone, you need a host. You need, in order to get approved on Apple, you need an icon, a podcast icon, and it has to meet their qualifications. You can easily go to Fiverr, which Fiverr.com. If you use offer code BLESSED, they didn't pay for this, but if I'm going to tell you it, I'm going to give you a discount too. Use offer code BLESSED and you can get like 10% off, I think, your first order. But you can find somebody on there that does podcast icons. So that way they'll create it based off of the specifications that Apple needs. So that way you don't have to do it yourself and you're not doing it right because you're not a graphic designer. You can just pay somebody like $25. They do it. And it's already created to meet the requirements to get approved. You need an episode already recorded, some type of audio, and well, I'll just leave it there. You need some type of audio in order to get approved on Apple. And that's it. You do need some type of editing software. If you have a Mac device, GarageBand comes free with the device. I use GarageBand. Audacity is another one, Audacity. And not Euphonic. What is that joint called? Adobe Audition is another one. So yeah, microphone, editing software, host, icon, audio. That's it. Great question, Bev. So Bev says, how do you get over the fear of sharing yourself sharing yourself to the world? Make sure I read that right. How do you get over the fear of sharing yourself with the world? Yes, if that makes sense. Yep, makes perfect sense. So first things first is when you build your platform, understand that it's not about you. It's about the message and the outcome that God wants to have on your platform. So I'm talking as a person of faith because I help people of faith. So thinking about the message or the impact or the outcome that God wants you to have on your platform, that's your foundation. Then you share whatever you need to share about yourself that will aid that outcome in happening, if that makes sense. So, an example, I am very big on building a platform with boundaries. I don't have to share all of me with the world. For what? It's not about me. It's about God. So I'll share what it is He needs me to share, but that's it. And most of the time, even if you're talking about something technical, so if I'm talking about podcasting, right? I don't have to share myself to talk about podcasting. I'm just sharing the system that Anchor Media has, the benefits of that system, the results of that system, I'm sharing whatever needs to happen for the outcome to happen. And a lot of times that is not a lot of me. And so with your show, you get over the fear of understanding that it's not about you, it's about the outcome. And also free yourself to know that you don't have to share anything. You can have boundaries and choose what's off limits for your platform. So for me, things like my marriage is off limits for my platform. You're going to see my husband because we be together, right? But you're not going to see our relationship online. You may see a couple things. I might take a picture of us at a date, or I might post a picture on occasions, but we're not going live together. We're not talking about marriage and relationships because I don't want to do that. And that's nobody's business, right? And it's not necessary to the outcome that is to be achieved on the platform. People know that I'm married, so I can talk about being a wife without sharing my whole life as a wife, right? I have a son. I talk about my son. You might see the back of his head most of the time, but I don't need to do photo shoots to post online with my son. That's off limits. I don't want to share that. So I'm not going to, right? So it's your platform. You get to choose what it is that you want to share, and just share what's necessary for the desired outcome. But you may get to the point where God may be calling you to share things that you're not comfortable with. And if you're in that space and you have to because he's calling you to, then understand that it's not about you, and think about that person whose life is going to get changed by your obedience. I love to think about people like Rosalind, right, from the Therapy as a Christian podcast. She's one of the podcasters that we worked with, and how her show has reached so many people. And I remember how her show was when she first came to Anchor Media, where it's been out for a year, but she wasn't getting the reach that she wanted to get, and she wasn't seeing the money that she wanted to see from the podcast. And after working with us, she started making thousands every month in her business. Her show was massive at this point, reaching, I think last month she might have did, I don't even know, but it's a lot. She has a lot of listeners. And I remember thinking, like, what if I wouldn't have started podcasting? That wouldn't have led me to Anchor Media. What if I would have still been doing my last business and didn't shut it down the way that God called me to, and I was still trying to make that happen? I wouldn't have been in Anchor Media. I wouldn't have been able to work with her. I wouldn't have been able to apply my gifts and skills of me and my team to get her word to the masses. Now she's helping people of faith get free from trauma and wounds. Like, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me. Mental health is a space where the enemy runs rampant, because a lot of people are turning to these spirituality concepts or these demonic things to get free, not realizing that while they're seeking healing, they're just making themselves more bound. But it's from a lack of knowledge. Because a lot of people, even in the faith setting, have made it seem like going to therapy is somehow a jab against God. And so Rosalind's podcast is doing some very important and significant things in the kingdom of God. And what would that have meant for who she's called to reach if I wasn't obedient? We have the society with the podcast, which is our membership community. And I think we have challenges and fasts. We do a fast every year, a group fast, and we do different challenges and things. We've had people rededicate their life to Christ. We've had people get free from addictions and from lifestyles that are not of God. We've had so many things happen in that society. Even at our last podcast retreat, we there talking about podcasting, and we've had people who got the gift of speaking in tongues at a podcasting retreat. Like, so much stuff happens when you just say yes to God. And it's important to understand that it's not about you. It's about what he's calling you to do and the role that you're playing in his plan. That's it. How many episodes would you recommend for beginners in podcasting? Well, and this is actually one of the frequently asked questions that I have. Before you start, I would suggest figuring out what format you want to go with, right? Start the way you're able to maintain. Don't start something that you cannot maintain, right? So when you're thinking about the way that you're creating your show, think about if it's going to be weekly or if it's going to be seasonally. A lot of people think that a seasonal show means that when the show is not actively coming out every week, that you're going to lose listeners, and that's not true at all. I work with a bunch of seasonal shows, and it's not true. And then also, if it's weekly, understand that that's a lot to keep up with. Every week you have to put out a show, and if you are not consistent, I always say consistency or a lack of consistency is a podcast killer. So if you can't put out your show when you say you're going to put out your show, how can somebody trust you to opt in to whatever you're selling to them? When you're even going to the advertising side of making money podcasting, they pay for shows that haven't come out yet. Right. So I have orders for ads on podcasts all through the rest of the year. I have to put out a show. But if my show is inconsistent, how can a company know that if it's May? If it's May and they purchase ad space in December, that I'm going to hold up my end of the deal. So first, think about what format you want to go into it with. And then I would say do enough episodes to put yourself ahead. So if you're doing a season, I will record at least half of the season before it comes out, because life happens. I would even record the whole season before it comes out, because things happen. Even with a weekly show, get ahead at least a month with a weekly show, because stuff happens. I've blinked and it's Sunday and I got to put out a podcast and I haven't recorded anything. And I thank God that sometimes we've been doing this for over 4 years now. So my fallback plan is always to pull an old episode and repost it. So I kind of have a benefit of just having a lot of content. But if you don't have that, like, you got to put out a show. So get ahead of your content calendar for sure. All right. Okay, so similar question to before. How do you know the best equipment and software to use for your podcast? So for the microphone, just make sure that you can hear, like, wherever you buy it, if it's probably online, because most things we buy online these days. But if it's online, make sure that you can see what the audio sounds like or hear what the audio sounds like prior to purchasing. So I would say do that. Also compare. So with the editing software, try out different softwares and to see which one is easiest for you to do. For me, GarageBand GarageBand was free. That's why I started with GarageBand, to be honest. But if you're trying to decide between like Adobe or Audacity, just choose whichever one fits your goal. So it's easy for you to use and it's cost effective. Or if you want to outsource that all together and have somebody else edit the show, then factor that in as well. How long does it take? Does it feel weird talking to yourself? Is 5 minutes too short? It definitely can feel weird talking to yourself for sure. For sure. Because you're literally recording a whole podcast. Nobody's around unless you have like an audience and you're doing it live or something like that. But yeah, it does feel weird, but you'll get over it. You know, you'll get over it or do whatever it is you need to do to feel more comfortable on the microphone. Maybe it's being more organized in a way that you plan episodes. That's why I wanted to do the podcast planner. And we have that for sale. If you go to Anchor Media, my bio, all the links is probably in my bio. But planning, being more prepared with the episodes will help be comfortable on the microphone. But as far as the length of the show, it depends. If you have a show that's entertainment based, it really can be long. I mostly listen to entertainment based podcasts and they can go like 2.5 hours sometimes. And I don't listen to them all in one sitting, but because it's comedy or something funny and entertaining, I don't care how long it is. But if you have a show that's more motivational or something like that, I would keep it to about 30 minutes. If you have an interview based show, an hour is usually it's pretty good, depending on like how you ask your questions and things like that. 5 minutes, it may or may not be short. It depends on your marketing. I came across the show before that was called like the 10-minute marketer or something like that. And all of the shows were 10 minutes. But that was the premise. We're going to teach you marketing in 10 minutes. So it worked. China of the Lux Life podcast, one of the shows that we have on our network, her shows are short. But that's what she offers. She offers bite-sized content to people of faith. So that's how it's marketed. So it depends. And if you can't fit, also don't make it feel rushed. If it's 5 minutes, make that be the best 5 minutes that you've ever spoken. Make sure that it's clear. It has a lot of meat. It's not rushed. It's not you saying and like and all of that for 5 minutes. So they really only got 3 sentences. Make sure that if it is going to be a shorter show, that you're providing a ton of value. Also, make sure that you're providing value on other platforms. Because if you have a show that's 5 minutes and it comes out every week, people are going to forget about you real fast. It's not long enough to make too big of an impact. So you have to make sure that you're reaching people in multiple ways so they get more of you throughout the week. So I suggest if you keep it short to implement a strategy like that so it's not easily forgotten. And if you have a 5-minute show, doing something like seasonal probably won't work. I know China's show, her show was coming out like every other week at one point. I'm like, girl, you cannot do 10 minutes bi-weekly. And nobody's going to remember. You have to make it weekly, and we're going to add more content to supplement it. How can I overcome the doubt of not being the ideal image of a Christian? The first thing I would say is make sure that your image is biblically accurate. First and foremost, make sure that your image is biblically accurate. Because something that I've noticed, especially because we do applications, a lot of people try to get catchy or trendy in order to stand out from, I guess, churchy stuff, to where they've gone too far, a lot of the sense, to where they've lost the biblical accuracy. And that's not okay. So I would just, again, first and foremost, make sure that you are biblically the ideal image of who God says that you should be and what righteousness is. And then as far as overcoming the doubt, because maybe you feel different from societal norms. I don't know. I didn't grow up in church, disclaimer. So a lot of that stuff, I just don't know. But if God called you to it, then you just have to, you can doubt yourself, but trust him. That's the best thing I could tell you, is trust him. And in trusting him and being obedient, your confidence will be built up. I was having a conversation before my last live, and something had happened today. And I was like, if this was me maybe 2-3 years ago, I would be flustered. But I don't care about that or what anybody is, whatever. Like, I don't care about that. God has done too much for me to be playing out here, or for me to be doubting anything or feeling a certain type of way, or no. God has proven himself so many times to me. When I open the Bible, he's done so much for his like, it's nothing else God has to do to prove himself to any of us. And so put your confidence in him. Put your confidence in him, and you'll get more confident in the process as you see him continue to show out in your life. But put your confidence in him ultimately, and all of the nerves and the jitters and the internal stuff, it'll go away, and you'll start to be like, what? Dang, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Look at what he's done through me. Look at what's happened. Look at my life. Look at how blessed I am. Like, God, whatever you want me to do next, let's go, because you've done so much. So that confidence and that swag will come just as you continue to say yes to God and see the fruit of that yes. What's your strategy for keeping content fresh, flowing, and relevant? Honestly, making sure that your content is Holy Spirit led. Simple as that. One thing, when I went on maternity leave, I took 3 months off, and I didn't record. I recorded like interviews and stuff, but it had got to the point to the end of my pregnancy where I couldn't do a podcast because I couldn't talk. I couldn't breathe. Like, I could not breathe long enough to do a full podcast. And so, I had to pull from a lot of like old episodes and do like repeats. But if your stuff is so focused on the time that it's in, then it may not age well, for one. So it might be something that was cool back then that ain't cool now, and it just caused problems unnecessarily. So it may not age well. You may not have the benefit to be able to pull from old episodes because it's not relevant anymore. So just make sure your content is Holy Spirit led, because that's timeless. That's timeless. And it's going to last through whatever season or what's going on in the world. So yeah. Is the open house on Wednesday or Thursday? It's on what day is that? Look, my computer is right here. Let me check, because I might have wrote Wednesday. Let me check for you right now. It's on the hold on. It's Thursday. I'm sorry. It's the 13th. That's a Thursday. I thought it was Wednesday. That's on me. That's gone. It's on the 13th Thursday. My bad. All right. So I've been on here for a while, and I've answered a lot of questions. Do we have any more podcast questions? Okay. Bev also said, do you have to use Instagram to market your podcast? No. If you haven't watched the live on Anchor Media's page I did with Tyra of the It's Not Your Diary podcast, and one of the things that we talked about, she increased her listenership by like 300 and something % within the first month. Her new season came out, it doubled the previous season, and she was able to see all of this 100 and something per month % increase in her show by not being on social media. And if I'm being honest with you, out of all the strategies we teach, maybe social media might be one. Like, so when we talk about marketing and increasing your listenership, it's not based off social media. And that's actually and I might do like a separate live about how that's possible, because I didn't realize this until recently, that a lot of people assume that social media is the way to market everything, and it's not. It's really not. Things were successful way before social media. So, and marketing is about conversion and finding the right platform and, implementing different strategies. But no, social media is definitely not even a fraction of what we teach as far as marketing goes. I'm glad you asked that, though, because that just tells me that that's something that we have to talk about a little bit more, without giving away all our stuff, but just talking about the understanding that social media is really not even a huge part of it. I didn't even focus on my social media until like when was I pregnant? Like 2020. Probably like top of 2020 is when we started focusing on my social media. My followers and stuff grew as a result of the podcast. So people would listen to the show, then they'll follow me on Instagram. And I might say sometimes like, oh, follow me on Instagram. And then I got to the point where I was getting close to like 10,000 followers. I was like, oh, well, let's get me to 10,000 followers, because I wanted the swipe up feature. That just makes it easier for me to sell stuff. So I'm like, okay, let's do the swipe up feature. So what we got to do to get me to 10,000. And that's when we started focusing on it. But the podcast was at millions of listens before we even ever focused on social media. Any other questions? All right. If all hearts or minds are clear, join us on Thursday. Thank you. She's calling confident. Thursday, May 13th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Anchored Media's open house to learn more about our retreats, what we do, cost, process, all of that good stuff. The link is in my bio, and it was great talking to you guys. I hope to see you on Thursday. Bye. Oh, and make sure you listen to the Blessed and Bossed Up podcast if you aren't.